Good evening and welcome to the public session of the Halton District School Board for Wednesday, April the 15th, 2015. I'd like to welcome everyone who is in attendance. We have no regrets tonight. I believe everyone is here. Okay, be quiet. I'd like to remind everybody that this is video voice recorded and actually we're live streaming. So all your friends and neighbors can watch you on the screen. And if you have an instrument or something that makes noise, could you please mute it or turn it off? Thank you very much. I'd like to have a motion for approval of the agenda. Vice Chair Collard and Trustee Pappen. Any discussion on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oh, just a minute. Oh, do we have to do it on the... Are you logged in? All those in favor? Joanne? Would you like to put your hand up for this? That passes unanimously. Thank you. So we're now up to is there any declarations of possible conflict of interest tonight? Seeing none, we have no delegations and no presentations. So we're up to the minutes of the board meeting from April the 1st, 2015. And I don't believe there was any April Fool's notes in that. No. Is there any comments or questions on the minutes? Seeing none, may I have a mover to accept the minutes? Trustee Gerbentz and Vice Chair Collard. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Do we have any business transacted in private? I believe we do tonight.
Yes, we do. We have two items. The first is report 15064 with respect to negotiations, and I so move.
Do I have a seconder? Trustee Gerbentz, is there any discussion on the motion? So all those in favor? Is everybody?
Leah's not in the room.
Oh, that's why. Okay. That passes unanimously. Thank you. I believe there's another item?
Yes, the second item is from report 15060 regarding negotiations, and I so move.
Just a minute, we have to have it entered into the system so we can vote on it. Oh, sorry. Do I have a seconder? Trustee Gray. Any discussion on the motion? So all those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We're getting better. Our next item is the order paper. Is there any comments, questions, discussion on any of the items in the order paper tonight? Seeing none, we're up to our action items. There's only one action item. I'd like to ask Associate Director Miller to come up and discuss the school year calendar, report 15051 on page 10 of your board package. Welcome, Associate Director Miller.
Thank you. Good evening, trustees. I don't really have much to discuss. The report's before you. If there are any further questions from last week, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'm going to read the motion. Be resolved, the Halton District School Board approve the summary of statutory and board-designated holidays and professional activity days for 2015-2016 as recommended through consultation with the School Year Calendar Committee. Moved by Trustee Gabent, seconded by Trustee Harrison. Any comments or discussion or questions for Associate Director Miller? Seeing none? All those in favor? I think she can. Dum, 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 dum. Leah. There she is. Thank you. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Associate Miller. So we're up to action items for May the 6th. Or sorry, I skipped. I'm rushing ahead. No, we're up to the student trustee reports. Trustee Sahai and Schneider.
Good evening, everyone. So we have our next Senate meeting next week, and during that meeting is going to be our student trustee elections. And so we have, I believe, 6 candidates running for the position, and so preparations are underway to make sure that meeting runs successfully. I met with Sheridan College last week in order to go like an event walkthrough for our upcoming conference, and all looks good for that. That's coming up on April 28th, and it's gonna be an all-day event at Sheridan College here in Oakville. And like I said, we also have a Senate meeting coming up next week, and that's probably just gonna be firming up all the details with our senators in regards to our upcoming conference.
And just to make sure everybody's invited to both of those, so those are 2 dates. The first is the 21st, which is our election date, which will be here. And the second is the 28th, which is our leadership conference, which is at the Sheridan campus in Oakville. So hopefully you can come and see our work of the year. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments for Trustees Schneider and Sahai? No? Well, thank you very much for your report, and good luck on the 21st. So we're now up to notices of motion. Do we have any notices of motion tonight? Seeing none? Now we're up to action items for May the 6th. Our first item is the HSTS Bell Time Review, Superintendent Veerman, Report 15053 on page 16 of your board package. Welcome, Superintendent Veerman. When you're ready.
Thank you. You recall at a January meeting, through the chair, sorry, you recall at a January meeting there was a motion to review the bell times for high schools. As part of our consultation meeting with the consortium board of directors, which includes the Halton Catholic District School Board, there was further discussion with respect to that motion. And as a result of that discussion, we bring forward a recommendation in terms of a potential review for a bell time study for all elementary and secondary schools. It would be utilizing a third party and would be based on parameters that would be established jointly by both boards, so that there'd be an opportunity to identify some of the, again, parameters you would like to have undertaken or included as part of the study if it's undertaken, and that further information would be forthcoming to the board. Certainly I'll look to Director Uwali or Chairperson Amos, who are also board of directors of the consortium, if they'd like to provide any additional comments or information.
At the meeting, there was a discussion around the recent E&E review, which efficiency and effectiveness study. And even though we were ranked one of the top 3 boards in the province, there was a recommendation to try and find further efficiencies. And because of the 2 French boards leaving us, it was felt there were further efficiencies because bus routes had been changed, but not significantly. So a review of this type would probably help us find those efficiencies. Are there any other questions or comments? Vice Chair Collard.
I was just wondering if there was any urgency to this motion in order to let the work proceed more quickly. Would you prefer that we waive the rules and deal with this item tonight?
Through the chair, the motion is also with the Halton Catholic Board. I believe they also have a process where they receive the information one evening and then they vote on the following. So I'm not sure there is an urgency. Certainly, if it's the wish of the trustees to vote this evening, that's certainly fine also.
I'm just wondering when they'll be voting on it, because if it's next Tuesday, then if we vote on it this week, then the activity will be 3 weeks quicker because our next board meeting isn't until May.
Through the chair, again, certainly that those comments may require then action this evening.
Then I so move.
We have a motion to waive the rules to deal with this tonight. Do we have a seconder? Trustee Gerbens. Any discussion on waiving the rules to deal with this tonight? Seeing none, just a minute. We have to wait, have it added. Where is it?
Just to waive the rules.
No, there is no waive. It was for another item that's already been put in, so. There, it's coming. Okay. So, all those in favor of waiving the rules to deal with these, the bell time efficiencies report? That passes unanimously. So I will read the motion. Be it resolved, the Halton District School Board support HSTS utilizing a third-party consultant to undertake a bell time analysis study for elementary and secondary schools in order to find route efficiencies and determine the financial impacts or cost savings, and that prior to the analysis being undertaken, study parameters will be established jointly by the HTSB and HCDSB, and that the cost of undertaking a bell time analysis study be provided to trustees for approval. Moved by Vice Chair Collard, seconded by Trustee Gray. Is there any discussion on the motion? Trustee Reynolds.
So my question actually was, I wanted to understand what happens if the other party, the Catholic School Board, doesn't approve the budget. I just wanted to understand that coming forward, what would happen to this motion?
Through the chair, the information would be shared with the trustees, and then the next steps would be determined.
So we would have to look at it again. It would have to come back. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Superintendent Bierman. Our next item is the Halton District School Board Recognition Program. Trustee L. Harrison, report 15055 on page 18 of your board package. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my trustee colleagues have a report in front of you this evening that is a result of a motion made on January 7th to establish an ad hoc committee in order to investigate how we may most appropriately recognize staff and student achievements and others who support student achievement. That committee was formed. Trustee Gray, Chair Amos, Director Uwali, and Manager Gortmaker were on that committee. We had 2 meetings. The first thing we did was investigate whether recognition was something that had some tiebacks to our multi-year plan, as well as our operational plan, and we determined that yes, in fact, a strong case could be made for such, and that information is recorded in the report. And we proceeded on that basis then to outline an approach that we thought would be both simple and meaningful for those who were receiving recognition. It was really important to us, the committee, that the program would inspire and recognize achievement, be inclusive of all people across our system, recognize that achievements come in many different forms, all of which are deserving of recognition and celebration, and that we wanted to avoid duplicating existing awards or recognition programs. So we laid out a communications plan that we thought would support effectively getting the word out, and we were hoping that the timing, should trustees decide to move ahead with this, the timing could work out with respect to, there's a special Education Week. There is a special week, it's called Education Week, coming, and that we could perhaps sync up the approval of this with Education Week. So thank you. I would just invite my colleagues who are on the committee to add things that I may have likely missed. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Gray, did you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you, Trustee L. Harrison. Your comments are well-founded and certainly reflect the work of the committee as through the 2 meetings that we had. And I think I would like to strongly just tie back the comment you made to the how this really is recognized in our multi-school year plan. And I think that in it and of itself makes this very, very valid and worthy of all trustees' consideration. And I'd like also to say that in our historical review, thanks to Manager Gortmaker, we were able to determine that a similar such program was in existence at one time, but that with the current proposal as outlined, I think that those impediments that were in the way at one point probably have been addressed, and that this is something that I would hope that all trustees would be able to support.
Thank you. Trustee Daniele.
Thank you very much. And this isn't the first time this has come up, but I am very pleased to see that the concern that I have had in the past with this has been addressed in this, because I have been at board meetings where the recognition went on till 8:15, and it happened to be a budget night, so we didn't start discussing the budget till 11 o'clock. So we have had in the past where these recognition systems have interfered with the actual business of the board, which we're here, and you have addressed that by allowing 15 minutes and only 15 minutes at the beginning. And so I will have no trouble supporting that if we all commit to sticking to exactly that. But I have a question of clarity, and I do apologize. It says that we amend our bylaws to incorporate a 15-minute period for recognition at the beginning of public session of the board on page 18. The bottom of page 19, it says awards will be presented on a monthly basis at board meetings. So we have a motion that seems to speak to our 2 public sessions, because we have 2 public sessions per month, And then in the body of it, it says monthly basis of the board meeting. So that's a juxtaposition that I'm having a little struggle with, that maybe we could tinker with the recommendation before it comes back to us in 2 weeks to make that clear that it is once a month, and at which one, it says that you meet at the beginning of the month to select recipients, so perhaps the wording of the recommendation could be the public session of the second monthly board meeting, would be my suggestion, but that was one of the clarity pieces I was struggling with.
Thank you. Vice Chair Collard.
Thank you. I was just wondering if we could add some clarity around the second last paragraph on page 19, where it says the director or designate director's office manager and 2 trustees will review all applications and select recipients. I'd like to ensure that all trustees have an opportunity to participate in this, and so I'd like to see some kind of phrasing in there where it refers to on a rotation so that all trustees have an equal opportunity to participate.
That was the intent. That would be 2 trustees, so everybody would have the opportunity, but maybe we can make it clear. Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. Through you to the trustees and the committee, I guess. I guess I'm wondering about what we think the quantity will be of these and how you decide if you had 5 national winners that month, how you decide who gets recognized at the board table, and then the rest, it says, is done locally. So was there some kind of criteria, not necessarily for those 2 trustees, they'll be bouncing in and out of doing it. Will there be some kind of criteria for how you decide who has their photo op here versus in the school? Or, I'm just curious.
That was talked about a little bit, and it may be that they get spread over a couple of months because of, there will be months where there'll be no one, and there'll be months where there may be many because of the type of activities that are going on. So some may be held over to the following month so that it can be fit into that 15-minute period. Vice Chair Collard.
I'd like to suggest that it could just be a standing item on all agendas, and that some meetings we would not have it, just the same as we have some meetings where we have no delegations or no presentations. And that way it's on all agendas, and if in a month we have a substantial number, we can have 2 meetings where we have them, and if we have months where we have none, then we have months where we have none.
I think that was largely our intent. We partly wanted to test the waters to see what people's wishes were around that. But I understand that it will likely be that way, that some months we have a lot and others we don't have any. So it's as required or as needed.
Thank you. Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. I totally support an attitude of gratitude, so I'm grateful for this. Just wanted to reflect in the report. There's a spirit of inclusiveness, and I appreciate that. I think that's got to be a priority, and I'm wondering if we can't put that in our recommendation. Because when I look at our rationale of student achievement, we really don't define what that is. And I know in the board, in the following pages do define it, but I'm wondering if we could be more clear so that when they first evaluate it, they can think of all students, and making sure that, you know, our spec ed kids are not left out. That somebody who has a second language is being considered, so that we have all equity lenses are being used to evaluate what is an achievement. Yeah.
Okay. Did you have any suggestions on?
Sure, I do. Thanks. Thank you. I would probably recommend that we take out that the board implement the recognition program as detailed in report 15055, and put in that the board implement a recognition program that is inclusive as specified in the Halton District School Board Equity Inclusive Education Policy, where it states, the board will serve staff, students, and families in diverse communities by incorporating the principles of equity and inclusive education into all aspects of operation,
Okay.
et cetera.
Well,
Yeah.
it might be a given because of it's our overriding vision, right? You can push your button.
Okay, would it help though if we, include that statement though, like we do other excerpts from the multi-year plan, just to, what am I doing? Oh, right. Yes, pardon me.
Let her finish talking, then you can.
Let me have some time to talk about it with Superintendent Bang. We had this issue before, and it was a question of is it necessary in each of our policies to be reflective of the 7 equity lenses, or is it an automatic that all policies are? I think it's the latter. I think all our policies need to be reflective of the 7 equity lenses. But let me double check with Superintendent O'Bang, and we'll get an answer to you. Or I'll advise the chair of the committee as to what is to be done.
Thank you. Trustee Collard.
I would actually prefer that it be an overriding policy and not one that we have to insert into every other policy, because if one gets left out by mistake, then we have omitted equity from that policy. So I would much prefer it to be an overriding policy.
Are there any other comments or questions on this motion, which will come back on May the 5th? Seeing none. Oh, Trustee Harvey Hope.
I just wanted to weigh in that I also am looking forward to this coming back, because I know I found that it was a good thing to have a place where the students, in particular students, but staff as well, have an opportunity for those situations where a formal recognition by the board is appropriate. And I'm looking forward to the revised method of doing it, but nice to see some students in the building for our board meetings too again.
Thank you. So this will be back at our next board meeting. So our next item is the Long-Term Accommodation Plan, or LTAP, as we affectionately call it. Superintendent Veerman and Mr. Renzella, report 15054, which is on page 21 of your board package. And I believe everyone received it either electronically or got a hard copy. So welcome, and when you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. Many of you have seen this PowerPoint presentation. And for the benefit of the audience reviewing this on the webcast, I'll go through it again. I'll try to be as brief as possible. Again, the LTAP, or the board, has annually developed and updated its long-term accommodation plan to comply with Ministry of Education requirements. And this has been reaffirmed recently with the March 26 ministry guidelines on pupil accommodation and on the community planning partnership guidelines, where the ministry is really expecting boards to have capital plans that deal with accommodation issues. So we are carrying that out, and have been over the last number of years, and will continue to do so moving forward. The LTAP provides enrollment projections both for elementary and secondary schools in Halton region over the next 10 years. The LTAP identifies new capital project initiatives for these for the next 4 years. Also some school boundary review initiatives, and also identifies the review areas in schools that are facing enrollment pressures and decline. And the LTAP has been posted on the board website as of Friday. not going down. Still not.
It's this arrow.
Okay, thanks. New to the LTAP this year is we have identified secondary plan areas that are identified on maps for each municipality. And these are more or less large greenfield projects that are coming forward from the various communities within Halton, and identifies whether or not we have designated elementary and secondary schools within each plan. We also identify a number of units and projected population coming out of those new developments. We have not included infill development, but those infill developments are part of our enrollment projections. We've also added historical grand totals for elementary and secondary schools, identified before and after where before and after school programs are, as well as where the core French grade 1 French locations are going to happen this as of September. We've added for each ERA and SRA annual percentage increase and decrease in enrollments. We've also included a French immersion feeder flow chart, and we've kind of melded in a couple of ERA and SRA changes, and they're identified on the slide. What goes into long-term planning? Well, of course, it's an enrollment forecast. We look at program delivery in terms of breaking down enrollments by English, French immersion. We look at existing school capacity. We also we have it not only by school, but also by review area. We look at the utilization of pupil places in these review areas. We've included site size, portable capacities in terms of accommodating additional students, and of course timing of capital projects that are being proposed. Enrollment projections, again, are updated annually, and we include a number of factors or parameters in the projections. They include timing of new developments, and I just want to point out and emphasize that we've only included those residential applications that we have received so far. There will be ongoing new applications on an annual basis from developers, but we have not included them this year, but we will continue to add them as they are circulated to us. We look at regional birth data. We have pupil yield rates of school-age children for each housing type, and we continue to monitor that, especially in the growth areas of Milton and North Oakville. We look at progression factors, what's been happening historically in the school, and look at what's been coming in from other school organizations, our coterminous board, and private schools. And of course, we have French immersion and English language enrollment, which plays an important role in projections in terms of where students are heading. Ultimately, it's very difficult to be 100% accurate. Our percentage differences in terms of accuracy has been about 1.5% over the last couple of years. Ultimately, there's going to be areas where we've had lower than projected and higher projected, but overall we're about 1.5%. Ultimately, it's very difficult to try to determine or project parents' choices, and we try to do the best we can based on these factors and parameters in place. School utilization, we have to understand existing and future school utilization, and factors that impact school utilization include, the primary class size, the full-day JKSK, the capacity for portable classrooms on site, and of course, one of the big issues moving forward with any long-term accommodation plan is other Ministry of Education initiatives. We continue to get, over the last number of years, we've seen changes from, the implementation of full-day JK, the cap sizes of 20 to 1. We've also seen the increase of the cap, the class size or the cap in the JK from 20 to 1 to 26 to 1. So there's a lot of factors that come into play, and that does impact on school utilization. The LTAP breaks down each municipality by review area. We have elementary review areas and secondary review areas. And of course, the LTAP reviews all accommodation needs within the respective review areas. The need to build new schools focuses on the capacity and enrollment growth within these review areas. And also, we kind of try to look at the capacity of neighboring review areas, which is essential to consider when determining accommodation needs. And this is also looked at by the Ministry of Education when they're assessing our capital requests. They don't necessarily look at the school or area itself, but look at all the surrounding schools as well to see if there's any available capacity we can use before they provide us money. Consolidation of schools, community planning and partnerships. If consolidations are required, a program and accommodation review process will need to be established. The board has an approved policy on program and accommodation review, and it was compliant with the 2009 ministry guidelines. As of March 26th of this year, the ministry has released new guidelines to be undertaken when completing a PAR. A review and amendment of the board's current policies would be required moving forward so that they will align with the ministry's new implemented guidelines. So we cannot move forward with anything until these guidelines are revised. At the same time, the ministry released its community planning and partnerships guideline, which will also require the board to amend its current facility partnership policies. And I should point out that a program and accommodation review cannot occur until the CPPG policies are amended as well. So they both have to go hand in hand. I just want to emphasize that the community planning partnerships policies or guideline focuses on opportunities to share facilities with community partners when building new schools and undertaking renovations, considering use of unoccupied space in schools and schools identified to be closed and disposed of. So they want the two to go hand in hand. They want boards to look at opportunities of sharing facilities before they proceed with actual school closures. Just reemphasizing some of the capital plan projects that we've had completed. Pilgrimwood addition was completed in 2014. We are moving forward with the completion of the Heritage Glen Public School, which is expected for September 2015. The Udanawi and Boyne Public Schools are scheduled to open for September 2015. New Martin Street Public School rebuild, we've identified as opening 2017, 2018. It could happen earlier depending on the municipal approval and issuance of building permits. Overall, in our elementary panel, we're projected to increase in enrollment by 2,300 students, or nearly 5% by 2024, 2025 over the next 10 years. We'll have a projected shortfall of about 546 students by the end of that time period, with an overall utilization rate of 101%. Secondary, we're projected to increase by about 1,900 secondary students, or nearly 11% by the end of by 2024-25, and a lot of it is a function of the elementary school growth and then moving on into and transitioning into high school. We're projected to have 212 available pupil places by 2024, which represents an overall utilization rate of 99%. So seeing those enrollment figures 10 years down the road, we're pretty good, utilization, and for both elementary and secondary, about 100%. The issue with Halton in our board is that it's where the utilization is, and we have areas where we're overutilized, and we have a number of areas that we're underutilized in terms of space. Looking at Burlington Elementary, there is declining enrollment in mature neighborhoods, which will lead to underutilization in all Burlington ERAs, with the exception of ERA 109. We're projected to have about 2,475 empty pupil places by 2024. There's a number of ERAs over the next 10 years which will drop below 80% utilization, including ERA 100, 103, 105, 106, and 110. And there are other areas of utilization which are projected to remain over 90%. And they are ERA 101, 107, 108, and 109. Oakville is projected to have a shortfall of about 900 pupil places within the next 10 years. We will see the new Udanawi Public School facing accommodation pressure as a result of it accommodating new growth from North Oakville. Again, as the new growth north of Dundas Street, which is ERA 118, it will likely result in the need for 5 additional new elementary schools. And just wanted to identify that we recently completed the boundary review for the new school, and we are proposing that the next Northeast Oakville number 2 school be in place by 2018-2019 in order to provide accommodation relief to Udanawi, River Oaks, and Munns Public School. Without Northeast Oakville number 2, utilization at Udanawi is projected to be 202% by 2024. Milton, again, one of the fastest growing communities in the country, and in some say in the world. And and as a result of the 2013-14 LTAP and subsequent ministry approval, we received funding for a new Martin Street rebuild, which was projected to open for 2015-2016. However, we're undergoing an architectural review is underway, and it will be discussed this evening, which, again, we're looking at timing will result in a projected opening for September 2017 at the latest. So the expectation is that it will be open for September 2017. It could happen open earlier, again, subject to the processes, the ministry of the building municipal and municipal approvals that, of course, will play an important factor. ERA 127 is the Boyne community. It has 6 elementary schools and 1 secondary school identified within the secondary plan. The boundary review has been completed, and enrollments demonstrate that a new Milton number 10 school needs to be open by 2018-2019. Of course, that will be subject to ministry funding and site acquisition. And by 2024, it's projected that there will be a need for 2,840 pupil places, elementary pupil places in Milton. And that does not include Milton number 10. So there is going to be ongoing demand for new accommodation in new schools, in elementary schools in Milton. Halton Hills is relatively static. Development is limited to a portion of Georgetown South and some rural estate development. The area is projected to have about 708 available pupil places by 2024 with the utilization rate of 87%. However, the town council has approved the expansion of the urban boundary west of 8th line to Trafalgar Road. It's referred to as the Georgetown Vision Area. And preliminary studies indicate another 6,671 residential units are to be developed in that community, which will result in about 20,000 new residents in that community. The timing is 2021 in terms of when we'll see the first students rolling in. Again, that's all subject to timing of servicing and from the south. As a result, we have identified the need for 3 elementary school sites in the Vision Georgetown area, along with 1 secondary school site. From a secondary perspective, the opening of the Dr. Frank J. Hayden Secondary School in 2013 has contributed to an overall surplus of pupil places in Burlington. By 2024, there'll be about 2,000 available secondary pupil places with a utilization rate of 72% in Burlington. And, again, it's not a fact. It's just a consideration should be given to undertaking a program and accommodation review because of the underutilization in Burlington. And the opening of the Garth Webb Secondary School has resulted in reasonable utilization rates for Oakville. We expect an additional 750 pupil places by 2024. Most of the additional pupil places will be required for the North Oakville community, where 2 secondary schools are planned. The utilization rate of all secondary schools in Milton is projected to be 160%, with a shortfall of 1,334 pupil places, and the need for a 3rd secondary school in Milton is justified. And as a result of current situation accommodation pressures, we are suggesting or recommending that 2 capital priorities for secondary school in Milton be submitted to the ministry when they request funding submissions. A new Milton Southwest #1 high school projected for 2018-2019 opening. Of course, that's subject to acquiring a site and getting the funding approval, as well as a 10-room classroom addition at Craig Kielburger, again, for 2016-2017. Halton Hills does not appear to be facing any accommodation pressures at this time because Georgetown Vision has not come into play, and we'll address those issues once that community starts to grow with a future secondary school site, but we don't envision that coming in line within the next 4 years. I should go back. I just want to reemphasize that with Oakville, we are looking at a need for a secondary school for the 2019-2020 school year. So our proposed new capital project initiatives moving forward is a 5 classroom addition to Halton Village Public School for 2017-2018. Oakville, another elementary school in North Oakville, #2 for 2018-2019. Milton, #10, 2018-2019. We have in play the Oakville Southwest #1 public school for 2017-2018. And of course, that is subject to a program and accommodation review. This has been a placeholder for the last few long-term accommodation plans, and we've continued to bring it forward. But again, it's subject to a program and accommodation review. Craig Kielburger, we're looking at a 10 classroom addition for 2016-2017, which would result in the school having a pupil or an OTG of 1,389 pupil places, a new 1,200 pupil place school in Milton in 2018-2019, and of course, Oakville Northeast #1 high school for 2019-2020. At this time, there has been some indication that submissions for capital priorities will be requested in the spring of 2015. We have not heard anything. Of course, spring goes to June 21st, 22nd. So, we can expect it up until then. And with ministry approvals anticipated sometime in the fall of 2015. Next steps. I want to point out that after tonight's meeting, we have already posted the PowerPoint tonight. We'll be posting this PowerPoint presentation on the board website, and we'll break it down by municipality. We will request feedback from the public on the LTAP so that they can submit it prior to May 8th. It will be we'll be requesting online feedback. And then once we get all that feedback, we will be reporting back to the board in the second meeting in May when feedback has been collated and collected and summarized. And once approved by the trustees, the LTAP will be forwarded to the Ministry of Ed, as well as local municipalities, coterminous school boards. And this year we've added some additional community partners. And these are partners that have been identified in the Community Planning Partnerships Guideline. Although we don't have them approved at this point in time in terms of policies, the guideline does suggest that we have to deal with these additional community partners. And so we will also forward them the LTAP or identify where they can view the LTAP to the other agencies identified here, including the district social services boards, municipal service managers, public health boards, LINs, children's mental health centers and it'll be circulated for information. I'll be glad to answer any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see a list of people wanting to ask questions or comments. So, comments and questions for our speakers. First up is Trustee Daniele.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you. Thank you very much. Not only just because I know a great deal of work goes into this, at a time when you and your staff have just come off doing 2 further intensive boundary reviews in Oakville and Milton. So I know your staff's been spread kind of thin, but this is my 3rd term as a trustee. This is probably the best LTAP I've ever seen in terms of information and the way it's laid out and the ease of use. So thank you for that very, very much. You've included information here that we haven't seen before, and I appreciate that. That makes our jobs that much easier. So that being said, I do have 2 questions though. The first one being ERA 120, and you state here that they will continue to be the overcapacity for the next 10 years, but there are no new schools planned in that review area. And I was just wondering about the rationale of not adding something to the capitals list for that area that we know is going to be well over capacity for the next 2 years. And then my second question is under next steps, and this is just clarity because I'm confused, because it says on next steps, the public will be providing feedback until May 8th. Staff is coming back to the board for the 2nd meeting in May, but our agenda says for action May 6th, long-term accommodation plan. So I just want to, that's maybe not for you, but I would look to my chair and just make sure that it's not actually coming back to us May 6th, it's coming back to us May 20th. So those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
I will direct your second question. I believe the intent was for it to come back for the 2nd meeting, but because it was here, that was the next, it just wasn't marked in the 2nd meeting. So after community feedback is part of it, then it'll be coming for approval.
Thank you very much for the comments. And again, I also want to thank trustees because this is much planning or the administration's document. It is your document as well. And we've, on an annual basis, have received feedback from trustees in terms of opportunities to improve, and hopefully we've addressed those requests and provided those improvements. Now, going to ERA 120, there aren't any additional school sites in that area, and I just want to reflect that ERA 120, there are no new elementary schools that can be designated. Most of that area, which is green on your map, is rural area. So we do not see the urban expansion happening there at this time. But in terms of Tiger Jeet and Irma Colson, Hawthorne Village, Bruce Trail, and Chris Hatfield, you know, those schools are, that community is more or less built out, and there are no additional school sites that are available in that area per se. So that's why we haven't included anything at this point. And, you know, there is no more sites. We were fortunate to shoehorn in Irma Colson in order to provide some accommodation relief. Yeah, it was a shoehorn, and we've also, because of accommodation, the JKSK classes were added to Bruce Trail as well, which provided some additional accommodation relief to that school. So, unfortunately, there are no other any school sites, even pieces of land that we could potentially build on at this time.
Thank you, Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. Through the chair. Could you tell me a little bit about when does the LTAP have to be presented to the ministry? Do we have a deadline, a date that we're working towards?
No, there is. We don't have to present it to the ministry per se, as there's no deadline. We do it on an annual basis as part of our planning or process in order to establish a framework in terms of moving forward with capital priority submissions, which will happen soon, hopefully. It also provides a framework in moving forward with future boundary reviews, boundary studies, addresses, and so those will come forward. So there is no need to, there's no time limit for the ministry. It's for this board's use in moving forward and setting processes in place moving forward. again, it's a tool. It's not, what we say in here or what we're talking about in here is we'll have to come back to the board in any form in order to get approval. They include capital priorities, notwithstanding anything else. We will have to come back to the board once the ministry makes an announcement and request a timeline for capital priorities. We'll have to come back and have official approval from trustees in a motion as to what projects are moving forward. Similarly with boundary studies, we will have to come back to the board in order to get approval to commence boundary studies. And with respect to program and accommodation reviews, we would have to come back to the board for that. So again, it's a tool. So it's for the benefit of the board. We have initiated, and again, the process has been to initiate community consultation just to get their feedback on it, and hopefully we'll get responses by May 8th, so that once we present them to trustees in May, the second board meeting May, you can make a decision. But again, it's just a tool. Thank you.
Is there no requirement, though, to present, to submit to the government at some point our requirements?
Yeah, well, that's the capital priorities, and that would be coming, once they make the announcement, we will have to generate the business cases to submit to the ministry, which this supports in terms of the details and the data.
This is the foundation document.
This is the foundation, which, again, will, and depending on when they're coming back, will be provided at a future board meeting if and when they do request funding.
Is it a follow-up? Could you go back on the list then? Thank you. Trustee Graves.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the numbers, I'm a fair bit concerned, I have to be honest, that there are only two Milton schools on that capital list, a public school and a secondary school. My concern is that given the numbers in the elementary sort of panel, and looking out, and given the fact that the capital priorities request has taken a significant amount of time to come to us this year, my question is perhaps for Mr. Renzella or invite the director to comment on why there's only one Milton public school on there. Because my understanding is that we effectively need one school per year in Milton, and even with the Martin Street build already on the books, this, as it stands, wouldn't satisfy that. And then my second question follows up on Trustee Daniele's question regarding ERA 120. And I'd like to use Hawthorne Village as an example. I understand that portables are used as a temporary measure, and we expect that a school will increase in capacity in a new area over the course of about 10 years and then decline thereafter. However, Hawthorne Village is an example of a school that is already over 10 years old now. It still has a porta pack and 7 portables on site. And when I look at the numbers out to 2024, I don't see that for the foreseeable future that they will ever get rid of their portables. So my question is, at what point does it precipitate some sort of action or build such that there's relief at schools such as Hawthorne Village that do have portables extending up to now 20 years without being into the children being into the school proper itself? So, 2 questions.
In respect to the first question, it was there's 2 factors that come into play in terms of the need. We are opening up the new Boyne Public School, and as you can see from enrollments, the school will be underutilized for the next few years, which will be servicing Boyne. So we have done a boundary review in order to fill up that school and to provide accommodation relief to Angie MacArthur and Tiger G. So that's one factor, that we do have underutilized space at that school. Secondly, Boyne secondary plan, or the Boyne community, is not building as rapidly as initially thought. There are some ongoing issues with respect to conservation Halton and timing and moving forward with registration of plans of subdivision. Developers are lining up to get they're submitting their subdivisions, but they have not been registered yet. So that's really causing a delay in terms of new development coming forth at a quicker pace. And that's why we've only had one elementary school in Milton for 2018-2019. Things may change within the next year, and hopefully, and we understand from the ministry that there will be an annual cycle for capital priorities, and if there is a definitive upswing in accommodation needs, we will request it again. But at this point in time, we just see the need for one school, and based on the projections. High school, again, I'm looking at the accommodation pressures. There are pressures, but we also have to be cognizant of the facility services ability to actually build a high school. They typically require 3 years in terms of getting, once they get approval and moving forth. So, 2018, 2019 is probably the earliest that high school could be built if we got funding this fall. So, that was another factor in terms of timing moving forward. But we have seen, the growth not being as exponential in the Boyne community as what was projected a couple years ago. The second point about Hawthorne Village, well, again, I may defer to Superintendent Cullen on the Portapack, which is more or less like an addition per se. It's not, they're truly in 7 portables. Also, we'd like to ensure that moving forward at some point in time, there will be other schools south of Louis St. Laurent, just like we did with Boyne Public School, and placing schools along that corridor. We can't do that right now because there is no servicing in that area, and we're still kind of dealing with some developers moving forward. That is the next phase of development, so they're going to start from Milton, the west side of Boyne, and then move to the east. So I want to make sure, and the thought process in my mind is, the school can accommodate the students. It has 7 portables there, plus a Portapack, and that at some point in time, the accommodation pressures at Hawthorne Village will justify the need for another school in that area on the border, like Boyne Public School. At this point in time, as I said, you have to be really concerned about overbuilding schools to beyond 900 pupil place capacities and whatnot, because we know at some point in time those enrollments will decline. So we also have to be cognizant of that as well.
Thank you. Trustee Oliver, can you go back on the list? It's an actual follow-up? Okay, go ahead then, sorry.
So I just want to clarify that while Boyne will be underutilized as that area develops, the other schools in that area are all significantly over capacity at the present moment as well. And with regard to Hawthorne Village, even with the Portapack, those portables will not disappear. I don't see them with the current numbers that I'm seeing in the LTAP. I don't see the use of portables in addition to the Portapack disappearing. So I don't know if you need a follow-up question. My question is, when would the portables disappear in that area?
And you used up your 3 minutes. Is there an answer or?
Well, again, I think the issue of accommodation pressures were addressed with those adjacent schools as part of the boundary review for the new school. We could have redirected more students from other neighboring schools, and the boundary review committee and the steering committee chose to limit the areas that were affected. We could have moved more kids from other facilities, but it was concluded that it wasn't. In terms of Hawthorne Village, as I said, it is a projection 10 years out. We may see a decline as well, but at the same time, we don't want to overbuild and kind of limit, as we've said before, that we've got to prove to the ministry that we have over accommodation pressures in the area as well. So it's kind of showing that they want to see the whites of the students' eyes before giving you any money. And if they're importables, it provides a better case for funding.
Thank you. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Superintendent Veerman and Mr. Ranzella. I also want to extend my thanks for this plan. It's a very thorough, well put together document, and I really like the staff report as well, which nicely summarizes by area and by for the schools what are some of the pressures and what are some of the possible strategies to consider. So thank you for that. That makes the review of the document and the plan much easier. And I'd like to put this out to my fellow trustees. In order to proactively and strategically position ourselves as Vice Chair of the Program and Accommodation Committee, I'd like for us to think about what aspects of the plan require a bit more exploring in depth for us to take on, so we can position ourselves to be better informed and plan for any of the issues that might be coming up, how to address. And secondly, I guess for our Communications Committee, I think it warrants for us to think about what aspects of this we would like to start communicating to our community, so that there are no surprises, so that people are appraised of where things are at and they're better informed, because obviously we can't expect everyone to study the plan and understand it in any great detail. So if there are opportunities for that, then I think we should consider them. So that's just something for us to park in our minds and undertake if possible. Thank you.
Go ahead.
One thing, I'm a bit remiss to not have stated this at the beginning of my presentation, and that is the board is undertaking a program and viability analysis review, and that may at some point in time impact what is going to happen moving forward, and in terms of a number of things, issues of where, which may impact and result in boundary reviews. In terms of communication, I just want to point out our typical process in terms of communication is there's an email center voice that's sent out the entire board, so everybody's aware of this. We do a news release, and we also have an ad in the paper. We have Twitter now, so we will Twitter that out to say it's available online for input, and we hope as a result of this identification and this communication that we'll get feedback, and in order for community is aware. We hope that the PowerPoint will be presented, and this year with the webcast, we will also be able to point people to this presentation, everyone's discussion and comments, so that they're fully aware of what's going on out there. So, in the past we've had public information meetings in each community, and the turnout has been relatively small. So we decided to go in a different direction. So hopefully from a communication point of view, we are trying to get it out to as broad of an audience as possible.
Thank you. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. And thank you also for all of the details in the report. My comment or question builds on the previous speakers related to consultation. And thanks for the explanation of active versus passive methods. It sounds like we are kind of building our repertoire of ways to reach out to the community. I anticipate that myself being from Southwest Oakville and with the Lakeshore Woods School on here, we may have perhaps a request to meet with that community to have that conversation about what's in here. But my question is related to the timing to develop the board policies related to the PAR, but more importantly, or equally as importantly, related to the community hubs. To me, and again, within the context of any suggested PARs, it's critical that we have explored all avenues to identify potential community partnerships. So there's that new list in the recommendation, which is very well appreciated. However, I just want to make sure and or pose the challenge that we are casting the net as widely as possible so that we can identify a wide range of potential partners. I'm sure they won't be clamoring at our doors, but you never know what's out there unless we ask. Thank you.
I may want to refer the question of policies to the director. But the community planning partnership guidelines are quite prescriptive as to what needs to be done and what's to be contained within the policies. I do want to emphasize that that the new community planning partnership guidelines, when they're looking at community partners, they want partners, and boards should have partners who will pay the full cost of operating the underutilized space. It's not a freebie, so and so this question will be, or this comment and this requirement will be included in our policies moving forward. But I think we've got to be clear that I will welcome you to the table, but you do have to pay your way. And I do want to go back that we have circulated this LTAP over the last number of years to our friends at the region of Halton, as well as local municipalities, who have had opportunity to review them and comment and follow up with us on potential community partnerships. We've had responses, and Superintendent Cullen can verify that, with the region of Halton on daycare locations. The biggest issue there is they want daycare locations where we are over capacity. The underutilized spaces in Halton is not where they have the demand. And so they're just looking at where we need our schools, and they want to kind of come in. And that's where some of the issues are happening right now. But ultimately, it's going to be the cost. They have to come to the table with money. And that's always an issue.
Thank you. Trustee Gibbons.
Through you, Chair, thank you very much for this very thorough report. This is actually more a question for the director. I have had parents already contact me with regards to the LTAP. I have people that are, I guess, scan the website regularly. And they are concerned about the Burlington PAR. In fact, I had someone demanding answers. And I was just wondering if there is some sort of timeline that I can give with respect to when this might happen. I'm not saying, specifically a day or even a month, but perhaps a quarter, that a PAR, especially for the secondary level in Burlington, may start. And B, is there an actual deadline that we have to meet to do a PAR? And how does it affect us if we don't do it, if we delay?
That's kind of a difficult question to answer. And I know that parents probably are picking up on the Toronto issue, where there seems to be a demand by the ministry to consider consolidations. We haven't had that message from the minister in Halton. It's up to us to decide whether we want to consider a consolidation of our schools based on the capacity and the functionality of our schools. I will say that I mean, although we probably could go forward with a consolidation and the park process prior to building a new policy, I don't think it would be recommended. I think you heard that from our head planner. So I'm now that Mr. Renzella has almost nothing to do, having completed those boundary reviews in the LTAP, I've made it a very high priority for us to analyze the ministry information on parks and to start developing our own policies. Whether we can get that done before June or not remains to be seen. But as soon as possible, we will try to bring a new policy to the board. And then following that, considerations may be given to actually putting it to use in either Burlington or other areas.
Thank you.
Superintendent Veerman.
Through the chair, just with respect to that question in terms of funding, you recall when we reviewed the revision to the GSN that was released in March, the focus of the GSN was with respect to boards and schools that are under capacity and how the ministry is starting to impact those boards that are under capacity by changes in funding such as the top-up, etc. So that certainly will have an impact for the board.
Go ahead.
So what you're saying is that having extra empty pupil places affects our funding.
Through the board, yes. Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
And until we have an actual PAR, we can't move forward. Until the director decides, whoever the director may be at the time, decides that they want to move forward, they have to bring a motion to the table asking for trustees to approve a PAR going forward. If trustees approve a PAR going forward, then it's going to be a process of probably 5 or 6 months, longer, at least. And then a decision would be made. So it's a long process. It's not going to happen quickly. Mr. Renzella.
Just to clarify processes, anytime that you're revising a policy, we have to go through our board process. And just for a reminder of the new trustees and the older ones, when the initial guidelines were presented in 2009, did I say former? I apologize. Former. Anyway, sorry, I apologize. It's hot in here. The guidelines were given out in, I think, in May or June of 2009. The board did not approve the revised policies until November of 2011. So, again, a lot of it has to do with the board processes and policy development. That's one thing. Secondly, in terms of what we see as the guidelines and the policies moving forward, the director's report to the board for approval is not just a motion. It will be an in-depth, detailed discussion on the current situation and recommended scenarios that have been reviewed and a recommended option. So there will be a requirement for a fair amount of work to be included in that report moving forward. So it's just not, here it is. There's going to be and it's prescribed in the guidelines that it has to have recommended options with all these details, and then we move forward with a public process. And what they've done now under the new guidelines is that the committee, the Program and Accommodation Review Committee, or the ARC, is more of a conduit of information than in prior years. So they may be asking for additional scenarios to be reviewed, but ultimately they're there to provide to engage the community, get some feedback, and provide it back to the board.
Director Uwally.
further comment, and this will be quite a substantial change to the way the Halton District School Board has done its business. In our boundary review process, it's quite an open process, and in fact, I think we've been complimented on it. We present an issue, not a solution. So we present an issue, we take it to the public in the form of a boundary review committee, and they help management generate solutions. And I think it's been well received because of that. It's not a fait accompli when it's, if I can use French terms, when it's done. But this calls for quite something different. This calls for a very detailed analysis, some very specific possibilities, if not the answer, and then a consultation process. So it's going to be a bit of a reversal for our community to understand and to enjoy.
And the policy has to go through program and accommodation to be created. Donna, don't leave. Sorry, Trustee Daniele. Sorry, I just. Oh, no. Sorry, I thought it was because I said it had to go to program and accommodation. I apologize. You're allowed to leave.
Wow.
Now she won't dare.
Now she's leaving.
Next speaker is Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. I have more than one question, so I will put myself back on the list, but I'm not quite familiar with this to figure out if you can push it twice already. My first question through you, Madam Chair, to Manager Ranzella is, I note that EJ is finally hitting that spot I thought we were going to get to a couple of years ago, which is physically running out of space. And I was wondering, it says that the staff are looking at a solution, and I was just curious as to when we might know of that solution or some of the options.
The solution is they are reviewing it. Facility Services is reviewing it. We are able to accommodate the students within the school this year, this coming year. So I would hope that moving forward we can look at some alternatives. But again, I have not gotten that feedback yet from Facility Services.
The accommodation in the coming year assumes we still only have 4 grade 1s, right? 80 grade 1 students, or I suppose we can go up to 4 times 23 if we take some room out of Milton. That is the overriding concept, because at one point it was, we now have had 4 classes of grade 1 in that school for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and that's having a trickling effect.
And I don't know the numbers as well as you do, but I wanted to, we are reviewing it based on the teacher allocations that have been developed through our HR department, and we're reviewing that in terms of how many classes are needed moving forward.
Thank you. Trustee Pappen.
Thank you through the chair to Superintendent Verman and Mr. Ranzella. I think my questions have been answered. The first had to do with the program viability with regards to the LTAP, and the second one had to do with the PAR in South Burlington. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you through the chair. So the LTAP reflects some of the recommendations, I think the new ministry policy, by including those new additional members. Public health boards, local health integration networks, children's mental health centers. I would have to agree with Trustee L. Harrison that I would like to see that our network, our net cast wider, incorporating many other organizations, informing them of what's going on in our schools. To that end, I would like to understand what constitutes informing these organizations. Are they just getting the LTAP and then they need to sort of interpret it and process it? Or are we giving them I'm not sure organizations, when they read this, understand the impact of a park, that program accommodation, what it means. It's a school consolidation or a school closure, and how that they can be involved in utilizing that space. So I guess I'm sort of speaking proactively to our potential policy changes, but my concern is, why are we not giving them a fulsome discussion about perhaps coming to the table and being a partner with us?
I think it's, the chicken or the egg. This establishes where we would have spaces moving forward. The process in terms of inviting the community group partners to the table will need to be derived from any new policies and guidelines based on the guidelines that have been released by the ministry. So we now have to move forward with that, which will establish the process of how we move forward. And that process will include, and it's prescribed in the ministry guidelines, of a public meeting with the community partners addressing all these issues that you have referred to. But we don't have anything in place per se. So it's, it's a document. But we will need to, moving forward, provide that opportunity, and that process will be established in the new policies that will be created concurrent with our accommodation or program and accommodation review guidelines, because they both have to be approved. One cannot kind of go without the other.
Director Uwali.
I would agree we have not aggressively sought partners for our buildings, but having said that, we do have community libraries in a number of our schools. Hayden is a pretty recent example of a cooperative effort with the municipality. We have daycare in most of our elementary schools, many of our elementary schools. So it's not that we're void of that. It's as Dom has said, often our request by community is in areas where we can't afford to give them space because it's where the new growth is. The other issue is adding a partner to a school may help you pay the bills, but it doesn't help the program of the school. Right? If your school goes down to 200 students, you're going to, in an elementary setting, you're going to have split grades. Adding a community partner is not going to make the possibility of split grades be lessened. In secondary, if you have a school of 450 or 500, as we've talked about, your program choices are limited because of the single, everything's offered in a single section and only one part of the timetable. Adding a community partner to a secondary school is not going to help that situation. And we have been, to this point, encouraged by the government to look at program viability as the #1 reason, or student achievement, let's say more generally, as the #1 reason for looking at consolidations, not financial well-being. Now, I think this new legislation is going to lean us more towards efficiencies, and we may be in the situation of looking at establishing partnership or closing schools for financial reasons more than for program reasons. So that's some of the history in Halton.
Follow-up, go ahead.
So just so that I'm clear, I certainly understand the programming consideration. However, when it's not, I would like us to consider what sort of opportunities there are. When an organization gets this report, they need to understand what the implications of a park are. What types of space is available? What are the opportunities? We're not sharing that. We're not giving them an opportunity to dream, to think, can they work with us? So those are the things that I'm concerned about. I represent a community that's recommending a PAR, and I grapple with educating parents on what that means to them, what could mean to their community. But I can't imagine the conversations that we would have with these partners. What are we doing to share with them what our goals are? So I would just like that consideration.
Thank you. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to revisit a statement the director made earlier with respect to how the new guidelines would be, quote unquote, enjoyed by the community, in that they, in some cases, flip around some of the good and proactive practices that we've had. It's my understanding that for both of these guidelines, they establish minimums. So it's my hope that we would continue and reflect in our policies proactive and practices that will continue those positive relationships. I think that that opportunity is still open to us, and if we can do that within the context of the guidelines, I would look forward to doing that. And I do have a question, which is, a number of times it's stated that there are, however, decisions that could be made by the school principal when needs arise to potentially increase classroom availability. That doesn't sound totally positive to me, but I just wanted to understand what some examples of that may be.
That's basically reflective of secondary schools. And if I recall, that statement was put in basically because we do understand in a 1,200 pupil place school that we could exceed capacity based on potentially timetabling and school, how they timetable a school and how they may utilize space to increase efficiencies. It does not apply to elementary schools, more specifically for secondary schools. And that was a generic statement that we felt was important to include for those because some people would see secondary schools that have exceeded capacity, significantly, and there are concerns about timing and whatnot, and we felt, and we've mentioned that in a number of our secondary school boundary reviews that, there is some flexibility in that will depend on how well the principal plans for that school.
Thank you. Trustee Harvey Hope. I might get both of mine in if there's no one coming up behind me. Through you, Madam Chair, to Manager Renzella. These are more LTAP document-related questions. I note that in ERA 117, which is Joshua Creek, Falgarwood, Sheridan, there is no mention anywhere that the FI students are housed in a school that is in 116. It used to be there in a previous document, and that sentence has dropped off. Correspondingly, though, it does mention in 116 that school is being used for 117. So, and I say this because I think sometimes, especially when it comes to capacity issues, people look at these documents and try and add up the kids in all the different in the different schools to see how many children are actually in that neighborhood. And if there's even an asterisk or something to say, go look at this other spot, because the numbers are obviously on a different page. We do that in a lot of other places. And the other reason why I bring it up is because in the boundary review that we had, people kept mentioning, well, Munns is in this neighborhood. Why aren't you talking about Nuns? And we had to keep telling them that Munns was in 116, but being used for 117. And so if we could just note that in 117 someplace, that would be useful. The other question I had was historical enrollments. The question is, what is the purpose of the chart? Because in 113, my neck of the woods, we closed 3 schools, and the historical enrollments of those 3 schools have disappeared, which makes EJ look like it went from a quarter empty to now over capacity because the English students have disappeared from that chart. And the same with the Brantwood and Chisholm and things. So for the schools that have had that happen, meaning Park 14 and Park 16B, in 117 it talks about how they were affected by the park, but doesn't necessarily say what happened in that the FI students went to Munns. And in this case, in our neighborhood, you go from 500 students to 1,500, and actually they were always there. So if possible, we could add those back in until they disappear off the list. That would be good, because it shows some really weird percentages otherwise when you close 3 schools.
That's a very good point.
Thank you. I missed it last year, I'm sorry.
That was your 3 minutes. Thank you. Okay, so there's no one left on the speakers list. So thank you very much for your report. We'll look forward to coming back in a month's time after we've had the community feedback. So, and I'm sure if other questions arise, Mr. Renzella or Superintendent Bierman would be more than happy to hear from you. It will appear on the May 6th agenda as a placeholder, but it will be for the 2 weeks later, for your aware. So thank you very much, Mr. Renzella and Superintendent Bierman. So we're up to the HSTS, the 4 information items. And I'm going to ask to try in, because it's already almost 9:30. If everybody's already had a chance to read the HSTS annual report, if there's any questions or comments for Superintendent Bierman. Seeing none, did you have any comments?
No, just to identify again the good work that the consortium has done over the last year.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that brief report. Okay, so we're up to the gifted screening interim report. Superintendent Zonnefeld, report 15056 on page 57 of your board package. Welcome, Superintendent Zonnefeld, and when you're ready.
Good evening. Trustees, in your package, you've seen the report, and I've got a brief presentation which includes most aspects of that report, which I won't go into all the detail since you've had a chance to review it already. Some quick background. So just to make sure everyone's up to speed, that we have 2 methods of identifying students as gifted within our board. The one of doing a screening of all grade 4 students has been in existence for, I'm guessing, 2 decades, probably at least, quite a long time that we've been doing that. And the other method is fairly new, that started as a pilot in 2009, and it is a nomination process, which we spoke of earlier, involving, specifically involving students in the SK grade 1 grades, but can also apply really to any grade is the intent, but that we try to capture students in SK and 1. So as I mentioned, that started then, the pilot in 09. Sorry, and I also mentioned the pilot in 09-10 started specifically in the west area of our board in Burlington, and then was expanded to the east and the north the following year. The timing of this report, you notice the 2 motions at the beginning of the report are from 2 years ago. So if you're wondering why is this coming forward 2 years later, it's so that we had enough data to be able to tell, gather the information to be able to give an accurate picture over time of the some of the questions that could arise from the data. We needed enough time, meaning we needed a full 5 years from the beginning of the first pilot to come all the way through the West for those students to get to grade 4. So we needed that much time in order to have that full set of data. So that's why it's taken this much time. And there's one additional motion that was came forward at the same time. There were 3 motions, and the reason why you're not seeing the one motion tonight is that it's a request for a review of our screening process, And when we gathered this data and put it together, our senior team made a number of observations, which you see at the end of the report, and we thought also maybe might generate some questions. So we felt that we should bring this interim report to trustees for you to have a chance to consider this data, and then perhaps we might think about some next steps. And sorry, I've just mentioned that. So there we go. So I'm not going to go into all the charts, etc., but I will highlight and talk about a few things. So on this first chart of the West data, and you can see the focus on that this is a cohort. So we're following the students from SK, those same students, all the way through until they've reached grade 4. So you can see that in the blue boxes. We included the rows or the pink boxes as well as the grade 1 cohort as well. So you could see follow those two cohorts of students going through. And so so then you can see on the subsequent areas, the reason why there's no blue boxes is because those started the following year, and so we don't have a cohort of SK students who have gone all the way through to grade 4 in those other two areas, in both the east and the north. So that's why the difference that you see between the two, or between the three of them. And then you see the full board numbers there, and we've just highlighted that full cohort again from SK. So those are the numbers that were asked for in the motions. The other data, keeping in mind that our screening and nomination assessment processes and tools are designed, they're norm reference tests that are designed to capture, assess, and find the top 2% of our student population with the intent that that's a criteria that we've set as our gifted cutoff. So you can see here that we have a range of identification rates across the geography of our system, from 2.4 in the north all the way up to 7 in the east. So it's an interesting observation with our overall board average of 4.3 there. And a very quick look at where those students attend, which is another request in the motion. You can see that we have about 60 to 70% of our students attending in the self-contained setting that are identified gifted. And then our screening numbers you've seen in the report as well, how many students are nominated for the process, and then actually the actual numbers of how many come through as actually being identified gifted. And then you can see our nomination success rate there. I'm moving through these fairly quickly once again, knowing that you've already had the report. And then finally, draw your attention to the observations at the end. And these are, as staff, we've identified these strictly as observations. And so to mention quickly then that our percentage, again, average is actually 4.3%. And you can see that range from 2.4 to 7. And that our identification rate has been on the rise as with that, following that cohort. In the fourth observation there, you can see that we have the kindergarten cohort to 3 in the west, and the other ones there as well. And you can see our accuracy rate of 35%. As a whole board, and in that range of about 60 to 70% over the 5 years. So I've moved through those fairly quickly, once again, knowing that you have those included in the report. So from there, I'd be happy to take any comments or questions.
Director Uwali.
Superintendent Zonafeld, if you go back to the graph of the diagonals and perhaps walk the trustees through the numbers there.
Okay, so.
Yeah, I would do the Burlington data.
Okay, so that's what we have there.
The concept that 20 students in 2009-10, 20 students were identified as gifted through the referral program. Then what's the 7?
So those are that's the same group of students who in grade 1 were again nominated and assessed and identified as gifted there.
So 7 more students of the same cohort were added through a nomination process in grade 1.
Correct.
And then 4 more students of the same cohort were added in grade 2, 5 more in grade 3, and finally 10 more through a screening process.
Right.
For a total of, in that cohort, 46 students.
Correct.
Okay, so I had a feeling they weren't picking up the diagonal.
Sorry about that. Yep. And so we only have 4 years of data for the students that were in grade 1 at that time. That's why you see that different color there.
And some of those who are nominated are not identified, correct? But are they, can they be re-identified the next year and then looked at again?
Yes, they could be nominated again at any time and could be, sorry, I lost my charts there, and could also be picked up in the screening process in grade 4.
We have a list. Trustee Gray.
A question on this very chart.
Okay.
Is the 7 additional, 4 additional, 5 additional largely because of students moving into the area, or are they, would it be considered students who are misidentified or have suddenly developed competencies that would consider them for giftedness? And the second part of my question is, a 35% success rate, is that acceptable as what we would see in other boards? Is this okay?
Through the chair to Trustee Gray, you're raised. Well, first to answer your question about the cohort. So we had 2 choices about how to gather and present this data, and wanted to be sure that we were looking at the process because the intent of this was to assess the effectiveness of the process. So if we included students who were entering into our schools all the way along, we would not know whether or not we could have caught them in SK or 1, or was it skewing our data because they were entering along the way. We also became aware that some families are coming to Halton because of this program, right? It's a limited number, but some are, so that would skew the data as well. So by following strictly the cohort that is coming into that started in SKN1, and any other students that come into it, we've excluded. So we've strictly followed that cohort all the way through to this point in time. The reasons why our nomination and then assessment data is at 35%, we've speculated, but I think we could, at this point, not safely say that we know the answer. So that speculation could go to things such as, are our staff effectively trained in identifying students to be nominated? If you recall, one of the graphs shows a high nomination rate and a much lower actual identification rate. So we're certainly nominating lots of students. are we nominating the right students? Because there are others, as you can see along the way, that we didn't pick up initially in SKN1. Why is that? We've asked questions such as, can we identify those students at that early age? Is the characteristics of giftedness, can they be a bit latent and show themselves further along in terms of a child's development? Certainly questions that we're asking ourselves as we look at this data.
Trustee Harvey Hope. Thank you. My question's kind of procedural. When we have a chart that has colored lines, the paper copies we can't tell. So if there's a way to put X's or some kind of chart-based way of noticing it, because you can't tell in the pre-reading what they are. Vice Chair Collard. Whoops, sorry, I skipped somebody. Oh, just a minute, I skipped you.
That's okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I'm really pleased to see that when I look at that blue diagonal, we have identified 46 students, and in the old process, in the preceding year, we'd only identified 22. So I think we're doing a tremendous job of identifying more students. And I do know that some students just need to be a little bit older in order to take the test. Some students may not have been nominated in kindergarten. The earlier that we can identify a student, the more able we are to provide them with what they need. And so I'm just really pleased that we're having such tremendous success in identifying these students and providing them with what they need in order to learn. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Superintendent Sonnenfeld. A couple of things strike me, and you've alluded to the staff training and understanding better whether staff are truly able to properly identify the student. And certainly when we see the disconnect between the number recommended and those actually meeting the criteria, that disconnect exists, and those meeting the criteria is significantly lower. There is a bit of a history on training, and I wonder if it's possible for those going through the training to somehow assess their skill level to proper identification. So I'll leave that with you in terms of if there's a program or something that some kind of a testing or evaluation method. And secondly, I wonder when we're looking at the rates, and again, we can't compare numbers by region because of the differences in the population, in the demographics population base. So it would be helpful to have proportions so that we can compare that. I wonder if there is any research evidence that would suggest what typically in a population similar to Halton we could expect to find in terms of number of kids that would test as gifted, if such a thing exists, so we can compare whether we're roughly, the norm, higher, lower, that sort of thing. Thank you.
Through the chair to Trustee Oliver, that's certainly a question that we've been asking ourselves as well, wondering if we're using a norm referenced tools, and these are quite well established research-based tools that we're using that should be helping us identify that top 2%, then why are our rates what they are? It's certainly a question that we've been asking ourselves, that it's a bit of our quandary in terms of moving on to the review portion. That third motion asking us to do a review is a bit of a question about the tools and a bit of a question about the rates, because we should be finding that top 2%. Maybe in certain communities with our board, those rates are completely research-based to be accurate. Maybe not. We don't know at this point.
Thank you. Trustee Graves.
Thank you, through you, Chair, to Superintendent Zonnefeld. Just want to thank you for this report. It was quite comprehensive, and the observations. When I read them, I think they make a lot of sense. So when we're talking about the percentage of students within a cohort identified that has increased, as Trustee Collard mentioned it, that's great that we're able to identify, and we're getting better at identifying those students. The geography aspect to it, as Trustee Oliver alluded to, is if this is a test that is identifying the 98th percentile and above of the population, then one could suggest that Halton has more of that population in its areas with its proximity to Toronto and so on. So the additional students that have been identified as gifted, like I say, it's increasing as the program has started, and the teachers have been getting used to the tools. And yes, I do think that there is the training around the use of the tools. We see the training that was offered, but I mentioned in SEAC that there's a difference between training offered and training received. I'd like to be conscious of how many of our teachers receive that training, and perhaps some follow-up is needed to keep that tightened up. So that the screening process just going back to that would clear up the accuracy issue. So the increase in the self-contained placement, I do think too that anytime you have a leading edge placement or program, that the uptake in the first few years, parents could be hesitant to take it. So I do see how that placement could. That percentage could increase due to just concern over that leading edge. And the last thing I wanted to note, just back to that diagonal graph too, is that in 2008-2009 we identified 0 students in grades from grades K to 4. So I wanted to echo Trustee Collard's comments that it's great that we're identifying those students and meeting their needs in this way, because I think as we all know, there are significant challenges with this group. There are mental health aspects to giftedness. So I think it's great, and thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Gerbentz.
Thank you very much for this report. I just have a funny comment. I mean, if we're looking at, I was doing a little bit of research on giftedness, and the tests identify the top 98th percentile, right? So doesn't that logically kind of move to that we should be seeing 2% of the students kind of qualifying?
Through the chair to Trustee Gerbentz, we've asked ourselves that same question. Does it make lots of sense in terms of the demographics of our communities that we might be identifying the rates that we have, or are there other factors at play that we're unaware of that are leading to these numbers? So we have a number of questions, and that's certainly one of them.
Thank you. Trustee Gray.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, just a couple of quick questions. One, using the equity lens, are the tests that we use to identify giftedness, are they appropriate for English language learners? And secondly, given the increase in the size of the population of parents accepting the identification and students streaming in to the programming, what are we doing for training of teachers to be able to deliver a curriculum and a teaching skill that accommodates gifted learners?
So with respect to your first question, sorry, through the chair, to Trustee Gray, I'd like to say with 100% confidence that yes, our tests are designed to support English language learners. I don't know 100%, so I'll ask that question and come back to you with that. With respect to our support for staff and training, we do offer quite a bit of support for our teachers in those programs, both in a few different ways. We offer it new teachers coming into those classes, similar to our other self-contained classes. We offer training for them right from the start as they're entering into that, sort of new to those settings. And then we also have networks that we run in each area of the board, and we do this for each exceptionality, that we have these network sessions where we provide release time for teachers to attend and learn new instructional methods, programming, resources, technology, etc. All those things those learning opportunities are offered to staff working with those students.
Thank you. Vice Chair Collard.
I just wanted to speak to Trustee Rebenza's question. There is a mountain of data supporting the idea that giftedness runs in families, and I would think that where there are families with very high levels of education, such as in Halton, you would tend to find a higher number of gifted children because you probably have a higher number of gifted parents. So it doesn't surprise me at all that the numbers are so high given the demographic of Halton.
Thank you. And there's no one else on the speakers list right now, but I do have a question. Sorry, you're not done yet. I have a question regarding the accuracy of the nomination process. 35% is not very good. And maybe could you walk us through what the nomination process is, and maybe has it already been looked at? How can we make it better?
So for the nomination process, Madam Chair, that we train our SK and 1 teachers. Each year we offer training in all the areas for staff to attend. In some cases, classroom teachers attend. Other time, more often we have our certs attend, and that go back and share the process with the teachers back at the schools, and because they're also a resource to teachers in that process as well, our certs. So staff attend that training each year, and that nomination process, so they do that collaboratively at the school, and then they bring those names forward to the SRT, where those characteristics and the observations and the assessments that teachers are doing in class are shared at the school resource team, and the discussion goes on about whether or not that student would be a candidate for the actual assessments. So that's what goes on at each school. The success rate has been another question we've been asking ourselves, that 35%. And it varies quite a bit by school, by year, and so certainly we would like to see a lot of consistency there, and we'd like to see our resources used well there also, because for every assessment that's done specifically for to see if a student reaches that criteria, that's my psychology staff say that our psychometrists can do about 3 gifted assessments for every 1 full assessment that they might do. So if we're nominating inaccurately students that to come forward for that process, we're using the resource of our psychology staff to do those assessments, perhaps unnecessarily. So we'd certainly like to see a higher nomination rate, a higher success rate with those nominations than we have currently.
And is there a cost to that nomination and for the testing? I mean, I'm just wondering, because with a low success rate, I believe there's got to be a cost involved, because I know there was a cost involved when we were looking at all the testing, trying to catch up in the past. So is there a cost and
Well, so, we'd have to go back and do the math on those numbers, but currently our psychology staff do about, each one does about 55 to 60 assessments a year, full psych assessments. They also do a number of gifted assessments. That varies by area, as you can appreciate from the data. So, we could go back and figure that through, but at the cost of a psychologist, for sure there is a cost associated with it.
okay. So Trustee Gray? Okay, Director Uwali.
Yeah, I'd just like to sum up, and I really appreciate the report and the hard work that Superintendent Sonnenfeld has put into this, especially as a newly appointed in this position, and the fact that this has been going on for a couple of years. We're not sure where we're going with the data. It may be data that requires no attention at all. I mean, it may be the rate of identification could be absolutely consistent with the demographics of our area. The fact that students continue to be identified as they march through the grades may not be an issue as well. But I think we need to get a little more assistance on this, and we may need to wait one more year when we'll have a complete double cohort done. Right now, we only have a double group in Burlington. In the other areas, we only have a single group. So we may need another year, but I think we're going to seek some assistance in analyzing this data and bring it back to you.
Thank you very much for your report. I think there's a lot of food for thought here that trustees will have to consider, and we'll look forward to a future report with more information. Can I have a motion to extend, please? Trustee Gabentz and Vice Chair Collard. All those in favor? Oh, sorry. Where is it? Motion to adjourn? No? 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 We don't need all of these on the screen. Next. Okay. All those in favor? Yep. Nope. If I end, can I end? Sorry. Can I end the vote and then, okay. That passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so we are now up to the Martin Street renovation update. Superintendent Cullen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is really to bring trustees up to date as to where we are on the Martin Street project, because we are at a relatively significant turning point or decision-making point in the process. We had a public open house at the school wherein the architect presented three, I'll say, variations of options. We had concepts that we talked about with the community members and the parents on that evening. We had a questionnaire and input document that was both available at the meeting and on our website. That we received the responses to. And really what we were looking for were those key elements of what the community aspects of the project might have to encompass. We'd already had some conversations with the municipality about the approval process and some of the more technical approval issues. And very clearly, one of the things that came back throughout all of those conversations was the retention of what's deemed to be the heritage part of the front facade of the school that faces Martin Street in its current position. The other one that was of interest to us, and we did get the feedback in the charts that you see, was really around if we have to trade off having the students remain at the school versus do a full renovation to the building. In other words, provide all of those amenities that most people would expect to see in a new school. What was the parent and student support for that approach to it. And I think the responses were supportive enough of the approach that indicated they wanted all of those items in the newly renovated school in some fashion, and were prepared to see the students move off-site to accommodate that. It wasn't one of those situations where we could say we can provide you everything and keep the students on site. It just didn't have that capability to it. So having them off-site is the only real way to facilitate that type of addition and renovation. We had not concluded the location. It was interesting. Several conversations came up that evening about where the students would go. So at this point, all we really have concluded that yes, all the students would go, and ideally we'll keep them all together. We're working with the planning department and the superintendent in the area to determine where they might go. We have two options, we believe, at this point that are viable, and that will, again, I think, necessitate some element of feedback and conversation, consultation with the community members as we move in that direction. We do have some time to look at that, but we need to get moving on which of the physical directions we're going to be going. So I'd be happy to take any questions related to them. I do have blown up versions of the pictures if anybody wants to see any aspect of the drawings or details that I can put up that would make that part of the conversation easier. So be happy to take any questions related to the Martin Street renovation.
Thank you. Questions for Superintendent Cullen on the Martin Street renovation? Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. My question is just related to the robustness of the questionnaire results. And earlier I talked about passive versus active methods of soliciting feedback. So we're basing a bunch of bigger decisions on 64 responses. So I just want, and some of those of which are pretty darn close in terms of the numbers of who said what. So I just wonder about triangulating those results with conversations with the school council. And I guess I would defer really to the trustee of the area just to see whether that is really the general sense from the broader community. That's my question and concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Daniele.
Thank you. And there were a large number of the parent council members there. And I spoke with some offsite as well. A lot of people came in. I have to commend you. That was an incredibly well-run meeting. I didn't have a scheduled formal agenda. It was very loose and people could move around. And yet the opportunity to comment was really well done. I was quite impressed. So yeah, that my sense is from the parents, they're not happy about leaving their school, and I'm not really sure they understand the reality of that in what that's going to mean and how long it's going to be. But they are also in the oldest school building in Milton, and they are aware of there's an educational gap between our old schools and our new schools in terms of our computer libraries, our tech, everything that we can put, the air conditioning in new schools, and they want that for their children. So I think that they are understanding of that. They just want to know what we're doing. So which comes into my plan. And by the way, can I correct you? You will be working closely with the planning department, the superintendent, and the trustee on the plan.
My apologies to the trustee through the chair. Yes.
Because that is my concern is the relocation of students and staff to an alternative site you have here, summer and fall of 2015. It's already mid-April. And I understand that the timeliness is choosing a design and moving forward with that. But from a parent perspective, the timeliness of knowing where your kid's gonna go in September is I think that's gonna be paramount for the parents because they just don't know right now. At one point I was joking with them that we were gonna just ship all the kids to Percy Mary. We were gonna reopen that. So that anything else we gave them would seem so much better. But that's the biggest concern for the parent community. Not how you're going to build the building, not how long it's going to take, but where's my child going to go in September, and what's the plan for that? So my concern is having the time to A, figure that out. You say you've got a couple of options. I'd love to hear them when we get a chance to talk. And B, when do we decide on one of those, and when do we implement it? When do we tell parents? Because I think from a parent perspective, I think that's going to be key. Thank you.
Thank you.
well, if I may, through the chair to the trustee, that's going to be the next immediate step. Obviously, having this direction on, and I think sort of a confirmation that yes, this is the direction we're going, now allows us to move forward with the fact that yes, we are going to relocate the kids out of the school and do that. The two locations that have been talked about, I think, are no big surprise to anybody that was at the meeting. They were talked about J.M. Denier's and the potential for adding some portables or extra spaces there to accommodate that. The other one that's been talked about is the new Milton School, that it may open under capacity, may have the room. So that's another one of the options that's been talked about. I think the EC Drury one has been taken off the table for the most part for a number of different reasons. The fact that the Gary Allen population has virtually filled up most of those spaces, and the mix of the students that may be on site. So I think the two viable ones remain J.M. Denier's and MacArthur, both of which have, or sorry, not MacArthur, sorry, Boyne, thank you. Having either of those, there are differences. One is in the building, one is portables, one integrates them with a new school that's starting up, one is an existing established school. So there are nuances there that I think we certainly do need to understand and have that feedback. And that's what we've talked about to date, is we need to get those pieces of the puzzle before we actually make that decision. The decision can be made, I think, relatively soon. It's not a complicated process. It's sort of a one or the other, in my opinion, at this point in time.
You have 36 seconds. Go ahead.
36 seconds. I wanted to comment on the work and the innovation shown in these three designs. I was quite impressed. They were three very different designs, and they looked at very different aspects, and they looked at the problem three different ways. I'm happy with the one that we've landed on with B. I think that's a very good one. I can really see how well that's going to look, to keep that historical facade of what was once Milton. That was Milton's high school originally. So to be able to keep that and keep what it is and very visible, I really applaud the work that went into that. I am wondering, how long do you think it might be before we get through the formal heritage study, would be my last question.
Through the chair to the trustee, the report should be in almost any time now, the formal report. So we've seen the preliminary indications of, again, the reference to the facade. We had the pre-consultation, as they call it, with the town, where we had planning and heritage, zoning, traffic, all those other parties. The region was there, Halton Conservation was there. So again, all of those things are consistently pointing us in the same direction. So I'm not anticipating any real surprise out of the formal heritage study at this point, but we are expecting it virtually any day. We started it, I think it was about 4 weeks ago. They were given the go-ahead to get going on it, and they said it was about a 2 to 3 week window to get it prepped and written. So we're anticipating that virtually any time, which could move us forward. And if I may, on that note, Jeff, can you put my laptop up on the screen? If you can. Thank you, sir. This is the plan that we have talked about going forward, and if I can zoom in just to give everybody a sense of the heritage portion that we're talking about, sorry, that is the current front facade of the Martin Street School as you see it from the street. And oddly enough, it's not just what it looks like, but it's where it is. We had a conversation with the planner. It really is the fact that you can see it from the main drag, more or less, as you go past. And we considered moving it, relocating it, rebuilding it. That was pretty much a non-starter. So this particular option has it where is as is. And then the new school sits a little bit to the side, but for the most part behind it. You can see that was, now this isn't actually a formal design, it's a concept at this point, but that gives you a sense of the scale of the old versus the new, and the fact that it would sit, this red heavy line is that facade that we've talked about. So that is the current front of the existing school. So you can see the new building would virtually sit right on top of the old footprint, which means it does have to go. It's the only logistical way to do it. You're correct. The driveway does literally line up right with the front doors. So, okay.
Thank you, Trustee Harvey Hope. You just gave me a wonderful segue. Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to Superintendent Cullen. Driveway. I note, I look at traffic patterns because I've spent a lot of time on the ground for the east crowded schools. The parking lot is that all the parents, if they're driving into the parking lot for kindergarten pickup, have to turn left. right across the outgoing buses. And so I mean, I like the plan, I like the option B, et cetera. And so my question is, at what point does this, this is an information report, and what are the next steps, and how might some of these issues be accommodated?
Through the chair, the trustee, as you know, we have to go through a formal transportation study. One of the consultants in the pre-planning of any school site is a formal transportation study wherein they look at where vehicles might be approaching or leaving the site, in what volumes, at what times of the day. They look at the current traffic patterns on the existing streets, and what they project what the future population might be, given that this school is moving from a JK to 5 to a JK to 8 in its grade configuration. And that would also entail potentially more busing because we've got a larger catchment area. So they put all those into their theoretical analysis and come back with what the number of turns and traffic crossings are. That study is what makes the recommendations about the design of the site and will be considered by the town's traffic department as they go through the approval process. So any of those things that would be considered as either a conflict or a volume or a bottleneck issue would be addressed as part of that process.
Go ahead. So does this still come back to the board in the traditional way when we approve it, or are we, this is for information and B's going forward? I mean, like, what's the decision tree here on how you decide what to tell who to cost what?
Through the chair, if I may, the next steps in the process, this one's a little unique because it's a decision-making point where in which one of these directions do we go in. That's basically what we're looking at tonight. The next step in the process is our conventional sketch plan. So we would come back with the sketch plan at an early enough phase in the design of the site/building that we could still make any changes to it. At that phase, we outline how many classrooms, how many are science, how many are JK, how many are in all those mixes. At that point, we will again have more input from the approval process department, such as planning, zoning, building, that if anything had to occur, it would have occurred by that point. And I can tell you right now, the portables that you see on the bottom left of that particular drawing right now, that boundary, our property line, is actually a rail line. And you can't put any physical buildings within about 30 meters of that rail line. So that's a no-go zone as far as structure goes. So if we are going to show portables, they'd have to be on the other side of the site. So we're actually talking about whether or not we would need portables given the logistics and whatnot. So there are things like that that come up during the process that cause us to make those changes, why we don't lock them into a board, I'll say approved design, because there's too many other entities that have jurisdiction over this that will have the ability to say yay or nay to certain things. So we will bring it back at the sketch plan phase with some of that evolution brought to it, and then beyond that we proceed with the actual physical design and tendering.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Cullen. I believe we exhausted our list, and thank you for the presentation. We look forward to hearing further information about Martin Street. At the will of the trustees, since it's already past 10 o'clock, I believe the Close the Gap project schedule could wait for till the next board meeting. Are we okay with deferring it till then? So could I have a motion to defer it to the next? Trustee Graves, seconded by Trustee Gray. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. So we'll defer that to the next board agenda. So we're up to committee reports. Thank you very much, Superintendent Cullen. I apologize for skipping your report, but are there any committee reports tonight? Trustee Collard.
Yes, I had previously notified trustees that I would be bringing a motion during committee reports this evening regarding the community hubs advisory groups that have been mandated by the government. And so I will be bringing that motion now if it so please the trustees, and I will need a motion to waive the rules. Be it moved that Halton District School Board Chair Kelly Amos write a letter on behalf of our board to the Premier and copy the Minister of Education as well as the other ministries involved to express our grave concern and dismay that there is no representation from the education sector on the Community Hub Framework Advisory Group, and further that copies of the letter be distributed as widely as possible to the community, including all public and Catholic boards of education, as well as the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO. And I so move.
You're moving to waive the rules.
I'm moving to waive the rules, and then I'm moving my motion.
Do I have a seconder for waiving the rules? Trustee Gervais. Any discussion on waiving the rules? All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. So we have, Vice Chair Collard has moved her motion. Do I have a seconder? Trustee Reynolds. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none? Whoops. Change topic. Too many things to... Next topic. There we go. Set topic. So all those in favor? Trustee Gervais? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Do we have any other items for committee reports tonight? Oh, sorry, I have to go back to the speaker. Trustee Harvey Hope.
This is sort of what you might call an interim report. We had an audit committee meeting last night, so there wasn't really enough time to get you the stuff on paper, but it was a good meeting, first meeting of the new audit committee of this term. We also introduced our new internal auditor, and we had external audit and regional audit and our internal auditors there, so it was a full house, and we got a lot done, and hopefully I will be able to pull together a paper report for a future meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank System Principal Shaws, who is involved with Safe Schools, who I had an opportunity to meet with and learn about that portfolio, which I am assigned to. And I just wanted to let trustees know that we're hoping to bring some information to all trustees in an effort to continue our professional development of understanding all the different aspects of what's going on in the school. I think it would be valuable if you guys would appreciate that. My second comment is from Committee of SEAC, and we had a wonderful meeting last time, and one of the comments that was coming up, and I just wanted to share it with the board and with our reminding our trustees who are involved in committees that SEAC as an advisory body is ministry regulated, and they really want to remind us that they would love to be engaged in your policy program formulation, how it affects spec ed kids. So they would just like to raise our awareness for them to provide a fulsome input into programming. They like the opportunity to take it back to their associations, and they're happy to provide their support. So just heads up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee Daniele.
Thank you very much. I would like to express my thanks to the colleagues who took the time and made the drive to Hamilton for the Central West meeting for OPSPA last week. It was very nice to see Halton. I know it was a Saturday and a lot of people couldn't be there, and I totally got that, but to look out and see the number of, there were 4 of us from Halton, which was quite nice. And there were new trustees, and I like that from all the boards. Most of the boards had new trustees there as well. So it's nice to see the support that Central West Region does get from Halton. Just a few quick notes for you from that meeting. The AGM is coming up in June, and at the AGM we will be holding elections, or semi-claimed, for the regional VP, the regional vice chair, as well as the policy work team and the education work team. And you do not need to sit on board of directors to apply to be for either one of those. So if you have any interest in either of those and in running, I would encourage you to check out oxpa.org for the information on that. And so the next meeting will be at the AGM, and then after that, the meeting at the fall, we are going to look to put together a joint meeting with Western Region to offer some professional development, and it looks like Upper Grand will be hosting that. So details on that will be coming as I get them.
Thank you. And seeing no other speakers to our committee reports, our next item is the director's report.
Thank you, Chairperson. I only have one item to report. I'm going to defer to Associate Director Miller for an update on the Program Viability Committee.
Thank you, Director Uwali. If you'll recall, I'll just start from the beginning. If you'll recall the recommendation that came to the board and the motion passed about the composition of the Program Viability Committee, and the purpose of the Program Viability Committee was to look at both English and French streams as it impacts on our students. And the composition was the people that comprised the committee was wide-ranging. We have representatives from elementary, dual-track schools, single-track French, single-track English. We have secondary representation, and we have system representatives, and we have 3 trustees at the table as well. And the purpose of that was to get a broad perspective and several viewpoints of people who are working in the system and people who are observing the system and seeing the challenges that it's facing. I think the trustees are well aware that one of the challenges is the impact that French immersion is having on some of our English streams, and as a result we have some schools in our system who are experiencing very low numbers in grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 primary English. One of the reasons we've included secondary people in this is because eventually those kids get to secondary. And some of the issues that may only be grade 1 right now may be grade 9, may be grade 10, grade 11 issues, and so on. So we felt it was important. So far we've had three meetings, a couple of hours each. The first meeting was we had a discussion about the scope and the purpose and what our focus would be, and it was agreed that the lens of quality instruction for both streams and viability for both English and French immersion students would be the lens with which we did our work. It was a productive meeting, and I think virtually everybody was there. There may have been 1 or 2 missing. And the discussion revolved around what is the work. The second meeting was a more fulsome discussion around what are the issues facing us. And the 2 main ones, there are various, the 2 main ones that are the ability to recruit enough French teachers to support a French immersion program and to support the number of students that we have that are taking French. And the second one is what is happening in our schools on the ground as a result of the great uptake of French immersion in our schools. And trustees are well aware, we've been through some difficult circumstances in some areas of the board recently of the small numbers of students that are in the English programming. We also had some data. Director Uwali presented the same presentation that he had done at the board around size of schools and what size of schools we need to support viable English programs and French programs at the same time. We shared data around French immersion uptake. Superintendent Dyson did a presentation on quality instruction and essentially what a week in school looks like for both English students and French students. And as a result of that, we have 3 objectives that came out that we are looking at in the committee. And the 3 objectives we have are to maintain efficiency and effectiveness of English and French streams, ensure students in both streams have equitable quality program, and to ensure the stability of both streams. So we're working with those objectives, kind of guiding us. So the 3rd meeting was just on last Monday, and I think I would suggest, and I think there's members of the committee, both at the trustee table here at staff, that I think the committee is well tuned with what the issues are now. The big questions, the big things that we're dealing with around the impact of French immersion, what it's having on our English program, and are we supporting our French immersion students? There have been some nuanced questions come up about French immersion. Are students in a 50% model as proficient as a student coming out of a 100% French immersion model? Currently, we don't measure language proficiency, but the truth be, the reality is a student that graduates in French immersion from our grade 12 courses grade 12 who has gone straight through from grade 9 clearly has proficient enough French to take courses in French in secondary school. So, you know, does it become semantics? Are they completely bilingual? One would assume, but they're certainly bilingual enough to take French courses at grade 11 and grade 12 levels. So the third meeting we had last night, because we believe that there's an understanding of the issues, we're using the lens of quality instruction and so on, we started looking, brainstorming possible solutions. And not unlike we do with a boundary review, where the boundary review committee is furnished with some scenarios to look at as a starting point, we provided the committee with 4 scenarios to look at on Monday night. The first one was status quo. The previous board had supported that primary core French would be in all our elementary schools by 2018. The status quo is, one can make the argument that the problems might be solved by just allowing that to occur, and that might slow the uptake of French immersion, which would allow us to have fewer staffing issues and would allow the English program to be vibrant. So that's one of the scenarios that's on the table, the status quo, that just we have primary core French and we continue on French immersion as is, to see what that would. The second one was a model where we have only single-track schools, single-track English and single-track French schools, French immersion schools, and versus having just more dual-track schools, you know, an increased number of dual-track schools. The third scenario was, and I presented those first 2 to the group. The next one was on capping, Manager of Planning, Ranzella, and Superintendent Etoff presented a little scenario on capping, looking at the Peel model, which is a regional kind of capping, and a capping method that the previous French study had looked at last year or the year before. And we talked about our coterminous board and the capping method that they use. And I'll just briefly tell you, they have 4 schools with early French immersion, and they're capped at 2 classes per school. We don't know how they address extra demand. So those were provided to the group. And I would comment on capping. There's various permutations on how schools can be capped and so on. So it was wide open for the group to discuss. The 4th scenario to look at was, was a late start in French immersion. And Superintendent Dyson presented what a late start would look like, grade 4, grade 5, but the committee was allowed to, if it was grade 3, whatever, to take a look at. There was one underlying assumption for all the scenarios, though, is that primary core French would be in all our schools. So we made that assumption from the beginning. There's a motion about that, and I might be speaking out of turn, but and it may be premature, but I think there's support for that at the committee level around that. So we made that assumption, and we figured it was a fairly safe assumption. So those scenarios, we had working groups. They had an hour to work on it. They were to look at the pros, cons, implications, and consequences of those. So that's where we are at present time. We have at least four more meetings, and the meetings will get longer now. They'll be 3 hours apiece. The next one is on Monday night, where we've taken the work from the work groups, and the entire committee will look at the comments, the results, the implications, contribute to that, and then we'll start to engage. I'm not sure we'll get to the engaging in the discussion about preferences at that point, but that is, we will be there, if not this Monday, the following Monday, that's where we'll be. And we'll start to develop, I believe, a direction of where we're going that would go to the public for public to provide feedback, consultation, however we want to phrase that. So that, I think, gives you a flavor of it. I don't know if any of the trustees or staff have anything to add, but that's kind of where we are. We have looked at, ironically, this is not unique to Halton. Halton is unique, but this problem is not unique to Halton. Upper Grand is looking at it as well, but they're looking at it from a perspective of, they're calling it a French immersion study. Ottawa Carleton is looking at it, and we had a brief report on Ottawa Carleton, and they're calling it an English study. Peel, as you know, did a big study, and they now have capping in their place, but as we suggested, it's not as, well, I won't comment on Peel, I guess, but, and, yeah. And of course, we're looking at both the English and French, and I think the committee is absolutely committed to looking at both streams, not one over the other, so that we can provide program viability to both groups of kids, those that choose French immersion and those that choose to remain in an English stream. So I'm open to questions, or if
Well, thank you very much for your report, and there are questions. Are you surprised? Trustee Graves.
Well, just I wanted to comment as someone who is on that committee. I wanted to thank Associate Director Miller and all of the other staff members and trustees who are on that committee. The discussions have been great so far and wide-ranging. My hope coming into this was that we would have a lot of out-of-the-box thinking and very much open-mindedness, and I really do see that in the conversations that are happening there, and the type of things that we're talking about and grappling with and considering. So I think it's a fantastic working group, and thank you.
Thank you. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you very much. And that's really great to hear. It's great, all of the options that are being explored and the quality instruction lens for all. I really feel strongly that we need to tackle the culture of exclusivity that's out there in terms of our French immersion programming, and just build awareness. So I look forward to how we're going to communicate what's going on in this piece, and that we are focusing on quality education for all. I think that's really critical. Thank you.
Associate Director Miller.
Through Chair to Trustee L. Harrison, that topic has come up in the committee meetings, and we have briefly talked about communication, but it's our plan that once we get to the point, we'll develop a communication plan that goes along with whatever recommendation we bring forward as well. So.
It sounds like the committee is doing some wonderful work, and I'd like to thank everybody who's involved in it, because it's not an easy task. This is something this board's been grappling with for quite a while, and we really looked forward to your final report before we go out to the community for consultation, because we know you're going to solve the problem. Thank you very much, Associate Miller. does the director have anything else to report tonight?
Nothing else to report tonight. Thank you, Chairperson.
You had somebody else do all the talking for you, too. Okay, so it's now communications from the chair. I have a couple things. First, Rayanne Yosef, a grade 9 student at White Oaks Secondary School, has won and qualified for the Lions Provincial Public Speaking Championship in May in St. Catharines. 10 speakers from all over Ontario will compete in front of a panel of judges with a prepared speech and an impromptu speech for the title and $1,000 and a trophy. She apparently spoke on a humorous speech on the benefits of high school. And I think that might be interesting to hear. But anyway, it left judges and many audiences wanting more, and she was awarded with a trophy and check and the honor to compete the provincial title. So that's kind of exciting. And I have one other item. Lisa O'Mary, a teacher with Iroquois Ridge High School, is the recipient of the Ontario Business Educators Association Award of Merit for the promotion of and increasing awareness of business studies. And so she's actually receiving the award at a conference next week. So congratulations to both of those. I'd also like to share that the Halton Music Showcase is tomorrow night at Hamilton Place, and I hope a few of you may be going to enjoy the wonderful music being performed by our almost 1,000 students that will be there. I know that I'm going, and I know Associate Director Miller is going to be the MC, so it's got to be a humorous evening, and the director is going as well, so I'm looking forward to it. And I think that's all I have to report at the moment, so trustees, questions and comments. The other one's on the board list. Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much through the chair. A number of the trustees had the privilege last week to attend the mental health symposium. And at that symposium, there were 320 registered for the event, which included mental health champions from our schools and other professional support services. It was a fabulous symposium, and the feedback, as reported to the coordinator, Teresa Wilson, is currently being cataloged, but overall, great support for that event, and wonderful feedback so far as what they're seeing from what they've been able to gather. Their evidence of success would include that all of the respondents seem to suggest they wanted more. There was lots of workshops, and many of the respondents would have liked to have attended many more of them. And so we're hopeful that this excellent event can continue forward. This year it was a full-day event. Last year it was a half-day, and I think the full-day event was very successful. While I'd like to congratulate Teresa Wilson and her convening committee, she has put out a shout-out to the trustees to remind them that on May 9th, it's Halton Runs for Mental Health. And this is a joint venture with ourselves and the Catholic Board and a charitable organization, Cameron Helps. It is a 3 of 5K walk run on the Burlington Waterfront Trail, and more flyers of information will be sent to everyone next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Gerbens.
I have some bragging to do. I have a lot of stuff. I put out a request for some good news, and boy, did I get some. Okay, so M.M. Robinson, the grade 9 concert band, won gold at the Music Fest Regionals in London and were invited to Nationals in Toronto in May, and the jazz band won bronze. The improv team won silver at Regionals, and they're off to Nationals for their 3rd year in a row, and they're going to be in Ottawa, April 23rd to 26th. Rambotics team placed 3rd at the North Bay Regionals. At the Bay Area Science and Engineering Fair, grade 10 student Caroline Mahut qualified as one of the top 16 projects to attend the Canadian-wide science fair in New Brunswick later this school year. The Drumline competed in the World Championships in Ohio. The Senior Reach team competed in championships. And Akira Moira, I'm really sorry, competed in the Halton Badminton Championships. And at the Skills Awards last week, MMR took gold, silver, and bronze in the Electrical Skills Challenge, and Justin Ide, Emily Soika, and Cam Hall, respectively. Also, I want to mention that I was at a really neat event this morning at Frank J. Hayden's Hayden Secondary School. They have something called Try It Mornings, which is they take an hour and students get to do all sorts of mostly student-run activities all over the school that included robotics, arm knitting, karaoke, music, instrument experimentation, henna, art, break dancing, jazz dancing, welding, and dyeing, and chocolate making. It was incredibly fun to watch all the students so engaged. And I have a recording of most of the student body singing Pina Colada. It was awesome. And just again, a shout out to those schools. I heard a few of them are attending or are participating in the showcase tomorrow night. And also on International Day of Dance, which is on April 29th, the entire Clarksdale School is going to be doing the Sid Shuffle, and we'll be doing it outside en masse.
Awesome. Trustee Harvey Hill.
Mine's actually just a question. We're supposed to have a committee meeting on Monday, and 3 of our trustees. That would be good, because I otherwise had a conflict. I may actually be able to go there.
My apologies, I meant to mention that. We are canceling the committee meeting on Monday because of the the Language Advisory Committee meeting. Program.
It could be language.
PPC. Okay, so we're canceling it on Monday. I apologize. So Wednesday will be, I can't remember. PB&G and budget.
Yeah.
Thank you. Communication. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. My update. So last night I held the second Super Council meeting for Ward 4 Oakville Schools. Again, a terrific event. I had invited Superintendent Obeng and his team to present on safe schools, and Ms. Suzanne Burwell to present on active transportation. So there was a lot of great information sharing, and that stimulated some really interesting discussion that I think is going to prompt, some more presentations and workshops, as well as school-based activities. So I'm really excited about that. It's a great group of parents. I'm really enjoying working with the councils and working with their schools. It was hosted at Ecole First Trail, and our next meeting is booked for June at Palermo. So looking forward to that. I'll put in a plug for Garth Webb Secondary School. Their theater group is hosting a musical. I believe the title is Back to the 80s. So it sounds like a really fun family event. Tickets are $10 and everybody's welcomed. There's a showing on Friday night at 7 and then Saturday at 2, I believe, and Saturday at 7. So I do have a flyer I can share with you. You can share with whomever you'd like. And I certainly pass that around the councils for the schools in my ward. And last but not least, as this is the National Volunteer Week, I'm sure you will all join me in thanking our many community, parents, staff, and student volunteers who contribute their time and services within our school system. Their service is invaluable and very much appreciated. So thank you.
And thank you for that reminder. I agree, we do. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you very much. Congratulations go to the Morden staff team who kicked it. in the bowl-a-thon for Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Not only were they super duper bowlers, but they raised over $500 for that organization. So that was fantastic. And also a shout out to Pine Grove for hosting the 3rd annual, I believe, Art Odyssey. They hosted 29 elementary schools on Saturday, and over 500 pieces of art were exhibited. And I visited that event and was absolutely blown away by the diversity and quality of art. I would have happily hung any of it in this space up here and or in my home. Our students are extremely talented. So thanks a lot to Pine Grove for hosting, and thanks to the students. And lastly, just to echo Trustee Oliver, with respect to Volunteer Week, thanks to one and all.
Thank you very much. I forgot to mention that last week was the Halton Skills Competition hosted by Craig Kilberger, and it was a fabulous competition. And I had the opportunity and honor to judge the grade 7 and 8 film and TV, and just the teamwork and the problem solving and the product that the kids developed was amazing. And I had the honor of judging with Superintendent Dyson, and I think we had a really good time. It was a difficult decision. But we also had the opportunity to go out and see what a lot of the other kids were doing. So I hope next year, for those of you who have never had the opportunity, you'll go out and visit. It's going to be at it's going to be at Bateman. So it's just down the road. And it's a fabulous day. There's over 1,000 students who compete, and I believe that I heard almost every school won something at some level. So, and I'd also like to thank very much Ron Valentine, Dave Lewis, and Barb Finan for their organizational skills and all that they do to make it happen, because it is a phenomenal event, and it's 26 years, and it gives students such an opportunity to try things and to excel in things in a different way. And sometimes it keeps some of those students in school because it's not all about what happens in the classroom. Sometimes it's the other pieces as well, which is why we need to maybe have home ec and shop back in grade 7 and 8. So that's my plug. I don't give up on anything. So, do I have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Gray and Vice Chair Collard. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Sing happy birthday to Gord in four-part harmony.
Keep telling them that.
Happy birthday to you.